Sunday.
So a few days after Christmas in 2019, I took off on a road trip from western Massachusetts to eastern Idaho. I was stressed out from work, and I wanted to get away for a week or so to reset my mind and come up with a game plan for 2020. I had a beautiful stretch of days with my brother, and I ended up staying longer than planned. While I was there, I even began writing a novel, a dream I had set aside for many years because I had taken on too much work. Work that paid well but consumed all my creative energy and left me drained at the end of every day, pushing my true dreams further away. But now I was finally chasing them back down. While I was at my brother's, I met a girl who lived in Denver and invited me to stop by on my way home. And before I knew it, my week had turned into two, and I was living like a beatnik down in Colorado with some wonderful people I barely knew. I ended up writing a song about my time in Denver, which initiated a whole new segment of my journey and took me north to Minnesota, where I knew a guy who could help me bring the song to life as a professional record. To Dark Pony and Mama T's, where I spent another week of soul searching and ended up recording the song and taking back another childhood dream. I was making an album with Dark Pony, and 2020 was starting to feel like life before any success, where all I had were my dreams and my drive. So after a life-changing trip, I was finally heading east for good. I was only about 7 hours from home when it happened. A loud squeak and a pop, and suddenly my temperature gauge was in the red. So I pulled into a Love's gas station on the border of Pennsylvania and Ohio and popped the hood. I saw my serpentine belt was loose, so I pushed it back over the upper pulleys and slid underneath the car to push it back over the lower pulleys, when I heard a voice. "Figure it out yet?" It was a guy who walked by me on the way out of the store about to leave. Before I knew it, he was climbing on the engine, figuring out the real problem. Turns out a tensioner pulley blew, and that's why the belt was loose. "There's an auto parts store right down the road. I can give you a ride." And this was the pivotal point. I could either choose to deal with the problem by myself or believe in the good in humanity and trust this guy to lend a hand. I was nervous, but my gut told me that he was harmless. His passenger seat was piled high with stuff. I could tell he didn't have people in here often. "This is just my work truck. I drive dump trucks in the summer and I work on them, but I'm laid off in the winter." And as we drove away from the Loves, he said, "They all think I'm crazy in there, but I'm just loopy because I'm on this medication. See, I got severe prostate cancer. They all just think I'm an old hermit, just waiting for me to die." And I knew right away I had just stepped into another world, into the reality of nowhere America. A guy who was born and raised in a working man town on the shores of Lake Erie, who never made it out in the end. He told me he had the greatest tool collection I'd ever see. Said if he hadn't have bought all those tools, he wouldn't have survived in a town like this. And so he drove me to the auto parts store, and it turns out it was going to take 2 days for the part to come in. "There's a Days Inn across the street. I'd offer to let you stay at my place, but it's a mess." And so we went and got the Rover and held our breath that it wouldn't overheat while I drove it to the inn parking lot. And before he left, he said, "You know, if you're bored tomorrow, I like going out to breakfast if you want to do something so that you're not cooped up all day." I said, "Sure. Just knock on my door in the morning. I'm in 214. And thanks for helping me, by the way. You really kind of saved me. What's your name?" "Carl, with a K. Carl Mackey." So now my return home was even further delayed, and I had officially missed an appointment with my bookkeeper to get my 2019 taxes in order. Another thing that was stressing me out like crazy. I still hadn't figured out a plan for 2020 to balance keeping food on the table and keeping my dreams of writing, recording music, and making these films alive, and I was anxious to get home and get back on track. But I wasn't upset that I was stuck. I kind of felt excited deep down. This situation was out of my control, and all I could do was embrace it. I couldn't stop thinking about Carl. The chances of him being there the minute I pulled in. If I was 20 seconds later, he would have been in his truck and gone, and I would have been on my own. But instead, now I had someone to go to breakfast with while I was holed up. And sure enough, at 9:30 a.m., there was a knock on my door. The town we were in was Conneaut, Ohio, but he lived right over the border on a back road in Pennsylvania. We went to breakfast at a place he often goes, and some of the locals were there and we chatted a bit. He took the last of his breakfast in a little to-go container for his chihuahua named Shorty back home, and then he asked if I wanted to be shown around the town. I was eager to learn about the nooks and crannies of the area. He put $10 in the tank of what he called the mighty F-150. Said he would have put more in, but he was waiting for his Social Security check. I guess he spends most of his money on tools. Said he can't pass up a good deal. He never did anything without hand-rolling a cigarette. They wouldn't stay lit, and he never finished them, but he always had one going. He was a real character. Genuine, pure of heart, honest, earnest, simple. He said a lot of big things without even trying. One thing he kept saying was he had so many personal projects he wanted to do, but he could never find the time. That hit home. I felt grateful that I was already aware of that feeling, but still had my whole life ahead of me to change it. And so he took me for a drive along the lake, pointing out all the old businesses that have since closed down, telling me the history, and saying whatever was on his mind. No radio, just voices and the rattle of the truck. The Trump impeachment trials had just begun, and he was telling me his thoughts about that. I listened intently because I wanted to understand where he was coming from. I was raised liberal, but I mostly avoid politics because all I've ever seen them do is cause stress and arguments and waste energy. I'm not informed enough to take a full-hearted stand, so I'm learning to understand both ends of the spectrum from real people's experiences rather than form an opinion based on all the bullshit news out there. Listening is such an important practice. You don't always need to be heard or try to convince someone. People have their reasons for what they believe in. They're not wrong, they're just different. The last thing you want to do is take it personal. If you respect differences and don't try to change them, maybe compromise is possible.
I got this military-looking hat on. And then, naturally, I'd say I like that.
Yeah.
But I'm third generation of that place.
What was your dad's name?
Sulo, S-U-L-O. That's a pen name.
Sulo.
Sulo Mackey. To my place. This is just a partial. I mean, he's got a contract with Dad's dog food.
With who?
The dog food company, Dad's dog food.
No way.
Yeah, they put that shit in dog food.
As we were driving, he kept talking about this engine in his driveway that he wanted to move into the garage. Said no one would ever help him do it. I said, let's go do it right now. And so he took me to his home, and it was just like he described. Tools everywhere, projects upon projects piled up and forgotten. His family has owned this property since the early 1900s, and now he's the last living Mackey left, besides his son. But he lives in Florida and him and Carl aren't speaking. Carl told me he knows he needs to mend that before it's too late and he loses his family's legacy forever. So he showed me the engine and brought me into his prized tool shop. There was just one aisle where you could maneuver through the clutter. He really did have one of the greatest tool collections I've ever seen. All American made, stuff that will last to the end of time. Though on the surface, it was pure madness. He knew where every last thing was.
This whole place, it's never been like this. I've come out here and made disaster zone out of this place. I've accumulated so much shit that I've created disaster zone out here. You know, not much of an impress.
He fired up the furnace and told me stories of his upbringing. My father got torn up by a tractor. Couldn't move his neck much or work very hard after. My mother and I used to walk through Conneaut selling vegetables to pay the bills. We sold eggs year-round, firewood in the winter, vegetables in the summer. It's never been an easy story. I fought my way out of this place. I was king of the road in an auto car rig, driving cremating ovens all over the country. His brother had cerebral palsy as well, and after his ma and his pa and brother died, he continued living on this property. It has since fallen into disrepair. So he went inside and put his coveralls on, and it was time to move that 6.7-liter diesel engine into the garage. We rigged up a little pull bar to the cart that the engine was on, and planned to push it with the mighty F-150 while I steered it with metal pull. As soon as we got it rigged up, he turned to me with his toothless smile and a dusty twinkle in his eye and said, "Now, most people don't use a pull bar to push things. It's all madness." Remember, Kyle, there's no method to my madness, but madness is my method. The thing I was learning about Carl was even though he's alone and surrounded by countless projects, has cancer and a son that won't talk to him, his property's dilapidated, all these things that would discourage most people, he doesn't give up. He still gets out of bed every day. At one point, he even said, "You know, the thing with Ed and all those guys back at the diner, they're nice and all, but just don't seem to understand that I'm just an old man on my own. They just want to see me go into the dirt before I'm ready." And that broke my heart. Because through all this, he still found a way to have fun. He was giggling and laughing the whole time he was making me smile. He was a fighter. He was used to the struggle and he accepted it and he worked through it. He was the epitome of perseverance. And there we were, old red and young blue, lifelong working man and modern millennial who makes his living through the internet, working together to solve a problem.
Keep her coming. Keep her coming. Another 2 feet. Yep. You're on the concrete. I don't think you'll be able to get both wheels on though.
That's all right. I got that far.
It's pretty damn good. You want to look? Shorty.
And I'll give you my toothless smile.
Wait, let me get my...
I'm shivering, don't blur the picture.
Here, right up here in front of me.
Look at him.
In the end, we're all just humans. And when you put all your dispositions to the side, you can genuinely connect with anyone.
We're half a mile wide by, I'd say,
See, here's another guy. He got run off from his place over there. Didn't want dump trucks in their neighborhood.
And after he dropped me off at the motel, I went to the bar to write about everything that happened. Kobe Bryant had just died. Another reminder of how fleeting life can be. It all felt surreal. The rover parts were set to arrive the next morning, and Carl showed up at my door again with a knock.
Oh, yeah.
He took me to a bagel shop near the parts store, and we read the Sunday comics and drank our coffee.
We get on it here, we're gonna go.
And finally, it was time to replace the pulley, put a new belt in, and be on my way. I'm obsessed with cars, but I've never had the chance to do much work myself. It's another one of the things I want to dive into once I figure out my 2020 game plan and dedicate more time to my passions. Which reminded me that the entire time I had spent with Carl, I hadn't really thought about work or felt stressed. I was just soaking in his honest wisdom and admiring the simplicity of it all. I was feeling grateful for the life I had, after seeing how hard some people actually have it. I'm aware that all the problems I talk about are just first world privilege bullshit in the end. But that's my life, that's my raw life, and that's what I know. It's all relative. You can't change where you came from, but you can change your awareness. And being open to experiences that can take you out of the little bubble that you grew up in can change your perceptions and change your life. The fact that Carl could still smile big and genuine through all he's dealt with, knowing all he really needs is his tools and his dogs, and ultimately all his projects. It was admirable. It's the kind of simplicity I want in my life. So he gave me the scoop on everything, showed me exactly what to do, and we worked together to swap it all out. And just like that, the Rover was running like new. After Carl put his tools away and we were saying goodbye, he said,
"Well, the way I see it, you helped me and I helped you. We're square."
And I don't think I've ever heard a more beautiful line. But a lot more happened in those few days than help with engines. And I think we both knew that. I told him I'd send him a letter with all the film photos I shot once I got home. He said he'd like that. So that was it. I was on the home stretch, and I finally figured out the game plan for 2020. No matter what the cost, I was going to take back the thing I had given up for the last 3 years. Time.
So to the mighty F-150 driver, the state line hopper, keeper of the family legacy, the cigarette roller, the tool collector, the vertebrae of America, impeachment scoffer, Chihuahua owner, man of many projects. May you kick that cancer and reconnect with your son, for Mackie must live on. Thank you for saving me, my eerie angel.